We live in a fast-paced and hectic world where it's easy to feel overwhelmed, stressed, and out of control. How do you manage all the competing pressures without losing sense of yourself? How do you stay focused enough to not only plot a path, but follow it? Welcome to Master Your Life, a show that offers inspiration, insight, and intelligence, as well as success stories from many walks of life that can show you how you can control your own destiny. Our knowledgeable and entertaining host and her guests give practical advice that you can use every day in the quest to master your life. Now, here's your host, Leaha Mattinson.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's show. I'm host Leaha Mattinson, and it's my absolute divine delight and pleasure to welcome this wonderful group of people to my stage. We've done some interviews with lots of folks in the past 7 years, and they've all come out just outstanding information and outstanding elevation to the people who are listening in and watching in. So this is a distinct pleasure because this is the first time that I've brought to my stage worldwide this particular group of absolutely wonderful, wonderful people who are doing such great work in the world. And I'm going to start off by introducing their fearless leader, although I know he probably does not want to be described as such, but I'm going to tap him with that distinction. Paul Mooney, welcome to the stage. Welcome to the Master Your Life show. How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you. And yes, you are right. If I didn't tap into my fear, I wouldn't be a leader. So I'm not fearless at all. I'm terribly afraid.
He's sweating bullets, and anyone who's watching on video will be able to see that. Just can you dab the perspiration off your forehead now before we get rolling, Paul?
I'll tap it off with some chocolate because I'm told that cacao is a sacred plant.
So he's been healed already. Show's over.
And I got my third eye as well. Perfect.
I can feel the vibration all the way through the thousands and thousands of miles that separate us, Paul. So I'm looking forward to you sharing that wisdom with our audience. So Paul, tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your mission in life right now.
Thank you. And I'm really looking forward to bringing in the other voices of Theresa, of Thomas, and of Jackie. So we join you from Ireland and from Buenos Aires now. And we're a community called Celtic Crescent. And Celtic Crescent is the idea of accessing the ancient knowledge and wisdom of the Celtic peoples who have traditionally gone to the west of the countries in which they have lived. So we consider you to be a Celtic Canadian because you're out in the west. And bringing that into the present using a dialogue methodology. And one of our teachers was a quantum physicist who died in '92, David Bohm, who was not only working with Oppenheimer on the Manhattan Project, he was also the scientific advisor to the Dalai Lama. So you can see the kind of range of teachings that we bring in. So the past of the Celt, the present with the dialogue, and because we're using technology, we want to use quantum computing in order to access that beautiful space in between the one and the zero. So we use a methodology called dialogue. We see dialogue as the glue in between communities and conversations. And at the moment, we're beginning to explore fascia, which I hadn't heard about until a couple of weeks ago, where we see ourselves as the mycelium that brings people and communities together. So we come to you from the green shores of the west of Ireland, and I'd like to bring in some other voices now, if that's okay, Leaha.
Yes, please do. Yes.
Great. Okay. Theresa, down in the beautiful county of Cork. Say a little bit about why you're involved in this community and a bit about yourself, if you can.
Hi. So yeah, I'm based down in West Cork at the moment, and my work, I guess, fundamentally is about empowerment and helping people to remember themselves and their source. The methods I use, or my avenues kind of are my past is working with shamanism, with Tantra, with energy healing, intimacy and sexuality, consent and boundaries. And I also have a lot of work with plant guides. And so a lot of this is about kind of understanding ourselves as more than just in the limited experience, so understanding ourselves on the greater levels of ourselves in all aspects of our being. And so I'm involved as one of the guides in the project, and also in the 𝘼𝙗𝙤𝙪 aspect of the work, which is around helping people to work through drug addictions. And that's a part I'm kind of beginning into more. But the idea is about kind of helping to get people to relate on a more conscious level. This is the whole dialogue aspect, is helping us kind of break down and come out of those conditions, the way we're relating and that aren't very healthy, and to start really listening to each other and create a new way of communicating that becomes a lot more effective than a lot of the dialogue that is currently happening in the world. Hello.
Right, thanks, Theresa. And Thomas and I have been dancing on opposite sides of the Atlantic since at least 2008, but perhaps in other lives too. So, Thomas, bring your beautiful voice in from Buenos Aires.
Well, thank you, Paul. Yes, as Paul says, this has been a journey of exploring the ways of helping through the positive and adequate influence in people to find ways to more peaceful relations that could build up new things. Personally, I've been, in a way or the other, involved with organizations, mainly business organizations, and yes, mainly business organizations all my life. First, as part of them, as an executive, as a senior executive, and at a certain point, I stepped out into consulting, and later on, basically into full-time executive coaching. I'm a person. I'm a voice and heart person, and my passion is about understanding and helping and promoting understanding in what makes us do, be, live like we do, and help in promoting knowledge, wisdom, helping knowledge and wisdom emerge in people as to see what their paths and journeys are in this life. So my real purpose is to help other persons in understanding, defining, and walking their own purpose, because I really believe that the essence of any living being is the contribution it makes to the system. So that's my passion, to help persons understand their strongest contribution to the system and to find life alignment in that. So, and if I may call Jackie in to share with us her journey, past and future.
Yeah, so I grew up in South Africa. I am a mystic, probably first and foremost. And I've had some deep and crazy experiences following my own intuition, my own lived reality in terms of spiritual connection and truth. And eventually dropping into heart and body experience in a way that has connected me more deeply with other people and allowed a kind of deep presence and acceptance to involve. And so coming into dialogue is dropping those judgments, dropping through the stories, and showing up as pure essence in deep presence. And so being here with this community, with this work, there is possibility for a new way of being with one another, with being real. And it can apply to any community, to any group of people. So my initial connection here is as what I call a tenzo, as the Buddhist kitchen master. So I hold the hearth, I hold the kitchen, creating a place of safety for people. And so in dialogue groups, in dialogue containers, having almost like an ordinary place to be. Kitchen, food is a way that we all know how to connect. It's a place that we all find relatively normal. And so I'm in that space, and also using food, cooking recipes, vegetarian food only, in a way that enhances the process of people's connection. So that's me. I'm in.
Thanks, Jackie. So, Leaha, why are you interested in what we're busy with? I can tell you what we're busy with in a few minutes, but why are you interested in what we're doing?
When I first heard about the project, I was interested because I saw a YouTube video that talked about all of the aspects of what it was that you were building, and I think we can speak to that during this interview. So a community, a bank, all of these great things that are tangible in the real world, but with this underpinning of, kind of, it's not just a building and it's not just somewhere that you show up. There's an actual substructure underneath that's at that quantum level, which I'm interested in and have been a fan and advocate of for decades. Like, how do we actually do community development, listen to people, understand their vulnerabilities, and to hold space for people, because people are in such a rush all the time. And that's how we've been wired. So there's no time often for compassion. It's very highly glossed over. So when you say, I'll pray for you or I'll help you, often there's not help in the real world. So a lot of people are feeling lost and very disconnected, homesick. So with the Celtic idea, when I heard that, I went, oh, that's something that a lot of people can relate to. For those who are just listening to the podcast and are not seeing us on video, some of us look very Celtic, and I might be one of them. That people would go, oh, she might be a little Celtic. She might be. And so part of that, again, it's like, where do we belong on this earth? During 2020, a lot of people were feeling more displaced than ever because we're, living individually in our homes, cut off from our social networks. And yeah, so I went, there's this homesickness in the world. The Celtic community has strong roots, a long ancient heritage that I think really people are thirsty for right now. And you were offering that for people, at least in the developmental stages. And I thought this is really interesting and it's important. So I want to bring it forward to people so that they can connect with the community, because I'm not, again, it's like, that's what this stage is about. Master Your Life is about helping people to have insight, intelligence, and inspiration to live a masterful life. And when you're feeling adrift in the world, it's very difficult to do that. So I was excited to find the work. And then inside that to go, wow, look at this amazing group of people who are actually bringing forward and working through things in earnest, like a very in earnest group. Does that answer, Paul?
Well, thank you. And it gives me a way to share a little bit of the backstory of how we ended here.
Yeah.
And I suppose it helps me point to Oscar Wilde, who wrote The Importance of Being Earnest. And Oscar Wilde is a Celt. And so in Oscar Wilde, in 100 years ago was going through customs, like we are going through customs now. Yeah.
Right.
And the man said to him, "What have you got to declare?" And he said, "The only thing I have to declare is my genius." Okay. And genius in Roman terms doesn't mean I'm smart. So when you had a birthday under the Roman calendar, you got 2 birthday cakes, one for yourself and one for your genius, because it was felt that your genius was a muse, a spirit given to you by the Roman gods. And so that brings us very directly back to my story of how I landed up here. I'm Irish. I had been in corporates all of my life. I ran big businesses for multinationals. Came back here in 99, set up a technology company, grew very fast, exploded in my face, ended up in a psychiatric hospital with reactive clinical depression, no family, no business, no wife, no kids, and a book called Awareness by Tony DeMello. The first 4 words of which are, spirituality is waking up. So I had a choice. Did I want to wake up? Because I had nothing. The second paragraph is, careful, not everybody wants to wake up. They want their toys. They want their wife and job and Ferrari. And so I had to make a choice. So I spent the next 10 years traveling the world, trying to find out how to help leaders navigate their way through depression. It's very simple. I was interested in work-related suicide. 1 in 7 suicides at that time were related to work. By myself in Australia and Africa, and I stayed in Africa for 12 years. Visited 20 countries, worked with about 10,000 leaders. And I ended up in Ireland in 2019, just before COVID, and I did my DNA test, discovered my Druidic traditions in my family, went back 1,500 years, so I decided to continue the family business. And when I did the DNA test, I realized that there was a lot more to me than had met my own eye. So I was just prepared to do the work that I was doing, which was leadership development work at scale. And the leadership development work we were doing was linking leadership behavior to the profit and loss account on the balance sheet. So we call this thing the quantum balance sheet. We were saying, if you want more profit, if that's what you're interested in, using a dialogue methodology for your leaders, your followers, your staff, your clients, your environment, it's going to give you more of what you're looking for. And then COVID came. I was locked down like everybody else in the Wicklow Mountains. And I had to figure out, how do I take a 3-day executive retreat, where there's lots of complexity and there's 2 guides and there's a tenso and it's really complex. How do I put that online? So while the world was busy thinking about social distancing, I was practicing distant intimacy. I'm saying, how can we set up an online community where people have never met, they would feel close to each other? So we started that process. We started a thing called the Guild of Ancient Dialogue. And we have a new member today who wanted to know how old you have to be a member of the Guild of Ancient Dialogue. And I just said 1. He said, 1 what? I said 1 millennia. You need to be at least 1,000 years old to get here. So we're not that earnest either, by the way. So the guild started. We started doing these calls during COVID, and this community grew up. And there's only a few that you're seeing here today. There are about 80 of us in 17 countries who are connected together, and we come in different ways. So I realized it was possible to create this distant intimacy for the leadership work. We've now been thinking about a village. So we've approached a local village. We want to call it a We Go village. Now, We Go is a word that comes from Baum, who's our teacher, who said, if the human species wants to evolve, it has to go from the ego to the we go. And I was seeing people talking about eco villages, but when I went in, they were like, eek, I don't want to be part of this. So I said, we need another name. So We Go Village came up. And the We Go Village really is about gathering committed citizens who are busy with social cohesion. We teach them the Baum quantum theory. We teach them the dialogue. And we help them to start creating value collectively as a sovereign community, okay? So they generate revenue, they make jobs, they track their community assets, they tap into their indigenous wisdom, they engage with each other internally, okay? They teach all the other parishes around them. And all of this is based on intellectual property using our quantum technology, and it's individual and group training. There's leadership tourism, there's healing, and it's founded on the spirit of the 𝘼𝙗𝙤𝙪. Now, the 𝘼𝙗𝙤 were the shamans of Ireland long before Christianity came to Ireland and long before the Crown came here and started enforcing their ways and means. And it was a restorative justice system and a circular economy, and women had as many rights as men. You know, there were 10 kind of marriages under the 𝘼𝙗𝙪 law. You were fined if you spoke ill of a mentally ill person. If I infringed on your rights, there was a predetermined fine, and you went to the 𝘼𝙗𝙪, and the 𝘼𝙗𝙪 said yes or no. And I could hunger strike if I wasn't happy or if you hadn't paid me. So there was the community organised themselves. There was no police, no state, no prisons, and it was done in small communities all over this land until we took on common law and the Crown, and we are where we are. So we've ended up with this idea of the Celtic Crescent as this borderline of ideas and practices on all the Western countries of the Celtic countries in Europe, Scotland, Wales, Ireland, Isle of Man, Cornwall, France, Spain, Portugal. Guess how many Celts there are on the planet?
How many?
150 million. So imagine if we can activate the Celts back into their own DNA and reactivate them. And, you know, we're not stupid about thinking how long it's going to take. We think it's a 7-generation project. We have a 500-year business plan. And so we're only beginning now to plant the seeds. And we were in a sacred forest today where there were trees planted 500 years ago, and the people who planted them never sat underneath them. And that's kind of what we're doing as well. And I'm tired talking. I want to do a bit of listening. So if I can open space for Theresa and Thomas and Jackie to speak what's on their hearts, if that's okay.
One thing I will say is that people have to put their hand up to be part of the 7 generations. It's kind of like the lottery, you know, you can't be part of the lottery if you don't buy a ticket. So if there's, you know, however many million people that are Celtic in the world, and there's 80 right now in your group, this is an invitation for people to go have some curiosity about their own background, their own history, and to go, oh, what steps would I take to actually find out, you know, who I am and how to identify with a particular group, and then to take a step forward. So yeah, I love that there's a 7 generations plan. We talk about that in a lot of my podcasts, and I think it's important because people then have a mind to the responsibility that it is. So the responsibility and the freedom that can be built in when you actually, again, in earnest, take on something with conscience. And I was very fortunate to be raised in a town of 1,200 people, actually on a farm outside of a town of 1,200 people. So I'm wired this way. And it's so when you live in the kill grids where there's, you know, 1 million people plus or several million people, this is a completely wild concept to think that you wouldn't have, that your neighbors would be looking out for you, to think that, you know, people would have, if you broke a window, you'd be responsible for fixing that. If you stole from somebody, you'd be responsible for replacing this stolen item. Like these are very deep, profound changes for people to contemplate and consider. How would your life be different if you had a neighbor you could really trust? How would your life be different if you could walk across the street with a shepherd's pie to share with somebody who just lost a loved one, or be part of that process of their loved one exiting the world because you actually had a relationship with them? These are very profound, life-changing things, life-changing. So,
and my understanding, Leah, is that's what happened during COVID. Mm-hmm. People have remembered. Mm-hmm. And I see Thomas. Thomas, you have something to add there. You're on mute, Thomas. You're on mute.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
I fully agree, Paul, and I really believe that even through its hardship, that's the gift of the pandemics. Mm-hmm. I've been very much in contact with persons who, by having to slow down, by having to retreat, they reconnected with dimensions of their lives which were completely forgotten. Mm-hmm. In the hectic lives in organizations, which I, as said, I'm more related with. The whole system had taken us into being productive entities, mm-hmm. and just paying attention to how we could improve that productive entity, but the slowdown reconnected with dimensions in the realms of creativity, of spirit, of community, getting back to families, reconnecting with persons we had long not been in touch with. Mm-hmm. And actually, I see so many persons asking themselves how to avoid getting back into those previous states. So, and that is why I believe Celtic Crescent, this connection with what was before we got into these structures we have never looked at in a questioning way. Mm-hmm. There is so much talk about change today. Now, are we clear what we want to change? Right? I mean, the old saying of there are ways of doing things right, but what is the right thing to do? Which is the real effectiveness. And if we try to mend, repair, change the wrong thing, we will only make it worse. So I really think that and believe that this has given us an incredible opportunity to reconnect with the basics of what makes us human and to build up from there and enjoy this building up for there. And dialogue is such a beautiful approach to making emerge and unfold together what we believe the right thing to do, to be, right? Mm-hmm. And I repeat myself, not to try to mend, improve, or change what was the wrong thing in the first place, or the inadequate thing in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Thomas. I mean, if I can bring in Jackie. Jackie put her money where her mouth is and moved to Ireland. So, why did you do that?
I think the sense of building community, of creating connection, of being able to ground community, to be at the beginning of something. And dialogue, obviously, circles, people have been talking to each other for millennia. And yet to make that the focus of who we are, how we're together, and not the talking part, but the listening part. And this creates a new way to listen, a new way to hear, and it's almost like a sensory system, because the listening, the communication slows down, and the hearing is more important than the speaking. And we're not just hearing each individual, we're hearing the field, the community. The community is more important than the individual. The community is what we're listening for and listening to. And how can we best hear that, what we want, as opposed to what any one of us wants, what any individual wants. And so I just happen to be in a place in my life where I can make a big change. and communities where I've always envisioned myself long term. And yeah, this is the one I've picked to be a pioneer with.
Thanks, Jackie. And so it's virtual and physical. So we had to figure out how we're going to do this under restrictions, and how are we going to do it with available technology, and how are we going to do it in physical space. So we're beginning to think about new ways of doing this. And maybe Tirtha, you have some perspectives. I mean, you've been doing this kind of work in Ireland for 20 years or so. I'll just see you on mute there. Yeah.
I've actually not been doing it in Ireland for 20 years. I only moved here 15 years ago now or something. Yeah, so I, something that's feels very important to me is listening in a new way, because I think it's something that there's a hunger in people, and I don't want to speak for others, but it's something that I kind of have noticed is there's a hunger for people to meet on a deeper level, you know, and the pandemic has, you know, the situation that we're in over the last year or so has, because people have had to stop and do things differently. And there's other questions that we've been asking that we maybe haven't had the time to before, because everyone was flying around countries and moving very quickly. And in this slowing down, there is an ability to become more present. And you know, when we're moving too quickly, we're running on default, because we don't have time to think about what's important. And it's in that slowing down that we can really be hearing more. And it is a very difficult situation in trying to help to get people to connect on more intimate, deeper levels when we're in a situation where we're being told that we're not meant to meet and that we're dangerous to each other. So while we're in this time where we're not meant to be being connected, and where we're meant to be, where there is potentially a lot of fear around seeing people, but there is still this hunger for connection, hunger for intimacy, where people are, you know, being isolated and not getting to connect and so on. And connection is part of human nature. You know, it's part of what is in our naturalness. I'm not sure if I'm quite answering actually exactly what your question was, Paul. But yeah, I'm feeling that we're in this time of needing to listen on a deeper level. And one of the practices actually that I work with through the somatic consent work is where we actually take an object and we take it in our hands and we play with it for a few minutes and totally bring our presence in. And in that slowing down, but it's in that slowing down that there's this magic that happens where we listen on a different level, we feel on a deeper level, and we begin to notice things we didn't notice before. And I feel that this is like part of what's kind of happened in this, you know, in this situation in the world at the moment is there is a need and a realization that there is a need to do things differently. Otherwise, we're just running on these defaults that might not be actually helpful. They might not be functioning or helpful for people. And through this dialogue process, through this learning other ways of listening and learning other questions to ask, it's like it's inviting totally different ways of doing things, because it's empowering people to be like, oh wow, wait a minute, my opinion matters too, and people are going to take the time to hear that. And what it can actually also help to resolve is that there are so many dysfunctions that happen in the world because people don't know how to relate with awareness, and they end up relating from a lot of like ways that we've been taught that is about kind of creating sort of games and manipulations in the way we might talk, and little like, oh, I'm feeling a little bit disempowered, so I might send out a hook that might make you feel a little bit bad so I can feel better about myself. And these ways of relating that are causing a lot of harm in society, and actually can be often, I'm not saying always, but often can be the foundation of a lot of mental health issues as well, because people doubt themselves and through, because they're thinking, oh, well, this person said that thing and they must be right in this, and there's a lot of confusion that can happen. But when we can ask questions in a different way and begin to listen, we can actually find out what's important for the individuals. And something that is or can already be difficult for people is to reach out to ask for things. But I do think that there is maybe more of an arising happening at the moment of people realizing that, like, actually, let's find ways of doing this. Let's find ways of being together in a different way, and finding new ways of relating that are actually really healing and empowering and help us to kind of, coming out of a dominating way of being with each other into more listening to the cooperation, out of the Darwinian kind of power of, the survival of the fittest, and actually more into understanding the cooperation.
If I can, Tirtha, so we have a client at the moment who have 100,000 staff, 32 countries. And they asked us to run dialogue for them online. And we ran 7 90-minute sessions, during which time they said, this dialogue's very different to our ordinary meetings. So we asked them, well, what are your ordinary meetings? What are they about? And they're speaking about the antithesis to what we're talking about, disconnection, power, or as Thomas often reminds me, the old trilogy of money, sex, and power. But then Thomas says, oh yes, but there's also transcendence. So we've been helping them to transcend the meetings. And so we looked at the numbers of how much it costs this organization to put those meetings together, okay? And we assumed that 30% of the meetings were a waste. That's all we did, very simple. That company is wasting $250,000 an hour. Why? Because so many people are in incoherent meetings. I mean, that's a very practical example of the kind of things that this dialogue has the capacity to convert potential into practice. And when we look at the link between, let's call it incoherence and profit, guess what is the ratio between coherence and profit, or presence and profit? It's the number that Tirtha pointed to. It's the number from Mother Nature. It's pi. We've seen that for every 10% shift in our dashboard, where we're measuring stuff, the organization is getting a 6% increase in economic output. So, I mean, it's biomimicry. We're saying, look, nature is an extremely old being, knows what it's doing. And if we can find ways to bring back those natural ways of evolving organisms, organizations, it doesn't just have to be Celtic. And the reason it's Celtic is because I can get away with it. It's no more simple than that. Mm-hmm. If I turn up with my accent, people go, oh, he's Irish. And no, that's it. But we're working with First Nations in Canada. We have somebody working in London who comes from Islamic background. We're talking to people in Zimbabwe. We're talking to people in Israel. So it's just Celtic because we're here. But once we figure out the golden thread, as you say, of village leadership, technology, healing, relationship, with this thread, this golden thread, this fascia of dialogue, it can be applied anywhere. And what do we want to do with it? We want to share it as much as we can. So we have a completely open approach to sharing and collaborating and learning from each other. So, for example, we had a dialogue with some young people recently, and we were astounded at how quickly they got it. I'm talking about within 12 hours. They are saying they're finding confidence they never found before. They don't want to be like their parents because their parents created the containment. And I mean, we write narrative after each of the circles. And the narrative for the youth dialogue is extremely powerful. Extremely powerful. So this dialogue thing can be applied to older people. I mean, we had somebody in the container 69 years of age. And when they left, they said, I never realized that my voice was so important. And they come with 69 years of wisdom from a culture that's been going for 10,000 years. We go, of course, it's really important.
Mm-hmm. Yes, there's a reverence that happens when you slow down and wait for things to arise, as you have all said. It's wait for things to arise. And I think the fun part is that you've never had this conversation before. And so you don't need to bring everything with you. You just need to bring your ears and your heart, and then wait for things to come up. And then it's always something new. So that content is priceless because you have the synergy of the group. So the things that you don't, at least that's how it feels or lands for me, is that you have the wisdom of the group and all of the generations of the group prior to now, because you know that you bring in your family history, you bring in your cosmology with all of your wisdom and expertise, not just in the physical body that you sit in here right now, in this physical container, but all of your memories, all of your genetics, all of your heritage. When you're bringing that all forward with an open heart and not in a defensive position, then you can integrate with the rest of the group. And then that synergy is like, whoa, what just happened there? And so things that may have taken decades to do can actually happen just like that, because you get out of your own way and out of everyone else's way, also to make things happen quickly. So whether that's health problems, financial problems, wisdom problems in the group, or because people just start showing up, resources start showing up, our own stuff that we didn't remember starts to show up. Because we go, I remember, this might help. Maybe I should share that. And so when you've got these open-hearted, earnest conversations, because that's the context that these stewards have been, the stewardship of this has been set up, then you can come with that defensive thing factored down. So, not present, maybe not even down, but not present. And that's a completely different thing than coming to a corporate meeting and going, all right, I've got my binder of things here. I better tick off A, B, and C. And I better look like the smartest person in the room, or I'm not going to get a paycheck. So my bonus is at risk or whatever it is, or my contract's going to end. If I don't come up with the best solution, and I've got the huddle meetings every day for 5 minutes to try and drive this thing forward, this initiative forward, and get buy-in. And it's a very different process that you are all bringing forth into the landscape. I absolutely just have such a deep appreciation for the work that you're doing in each moment. I just think it's such a great invitation for people to consider coming in and becoming a part, or at least dipping your toe in the water of what you are all doing, and then see if there's a fit and see if there's some synergy. Is that what the invitation is, Paul? Would you say for people who are new to listening to this kind of information, or what do you think is the invitation?
So the invitation is to practice. So, for example, instead of us trying to sell what we do or talk about it, or I hear people who are on platforms like yourself, we don't really do that. We say, come in to our 3-day workshop, sit down there, we'll explain to you what dialogue's about, and then we're starting 1, 2, 3, go. That's it. And then we look at what we were learning afterwards. So it's very much an action learning methodology. And what I hear you describing of that person who walks into the corporate meeting and has their binder, that for me is plutocracy or patriarchy or, the shadow of the masculine. We're on this side saying the feminine is very powerful, extremely powerful, and the feminine deities in this land are still alive. Danu and Gubnut and Bridget and Anya, and they're out there in the land. The forest we were in today is rippling with nurture and femininity. And I was just looking at trees and I could feel myself expanding. Oh, this is absolutely amazing. And, I see people who say, well, what's your healing project? And they send me a diagram of a hospital. I say, no, that's not a healing center. And I send them back a picture of a forest. I said, that's a healing center. You put a tent in there, Get somebody into there for 3 days. Mind them. Let them tell you their stories, put on a fire, give them clean water, clean food. In 3 days, they'll come out of that then different. And so they're ancient practices. And as everybody here is saying, let's take the ancient practices, bring them into the now. Yeah? Use technology the way we're using it now. I didn't meet half of these people until Zoom was around. And let's combine them all and offer some ideas, but more practices. So the invitation is to practice. But we don't love content, Leaha. You won't find us teaching a lot. We'll model, we'll wait 2 seconds after somebody speaks. 1, 2, that's it. Advanced practice is 7 seconds. You know how hard that is?
On radio, it's impossible.
Well, I have a face for radio, so it should be all right. Yeah, you're right. If silence comes on the radio, people think it's switched off. It's not. It's switched on. Because silence isn't the absence of anything. It's the presence of everything.
Mm-hmm.
Silence is where we build up meaning, actually. Were it not for silence, we would be completely unable to build meaning of what is happening, what's being said. So it's really the strong other side of language, listening and silence.
And listen and silent with the same letters. The same thing. It feels like we might check out with you, Leaha. That'd be okay? Yeah?
Perfect timing.
Okay. Tirtha, your checkout for today.
It's been really lovely to connect in and to have this conversation and get to share the important work a little bit with your audience, Leaha. So thank you for this opportunity, and it's good to connect with you again. Yeah, and nice to feel like we're reaching out and inviting an open invitation for others. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tirtha. Thomas?
I'm checking out with a lot of joy. This was a very enjoyable experience, and I've been doing online work for many, many years now, so it's not new, but there are moments when connections are stronger, and this was one of them. So I thank you very much for the space, for sharing with this homey group, and for the possibility to reach out to others who might feel in symphony with this.
Symphony, what a beautiful word. That just hit me right at my chest. I don't know about the rest of you. Jackie?
Yes, thank you. It's been beautiful to meet today. One of the things that came up in just this last little bit was about the voices being heard. And it's one thing that I've found very special to me. I've been meeting regularly with a dialogue group since the beginning of COVID lockdowns in March. And I'm not particularly academic, and I'm not particularly learned. And I've met the most amazing people, just, really brilliant people, those who are academic and are well qualified and so on. And my voice has always been valued. And because it's not about the content, it's about the human being. And so that sense of value is something that I really believe we offer and we hold sacred. And that's why it is a holy group and why it is a holy circle. And why the invitation is so open, because every single voice is human and is welcome. That's my checkout.
Thanks, Jackie. And I'll check out saying we're just a bunch of druids, who come from the future into the present to make sure we get there by tiny trajectory changes and how people are thinking. Dialogue is proposed by our teacher, David Bohm, as the thing which helps people to think about their thinking. Because he makes the proposition, if we work with a thought from somebody else, it's not even ours. If we work with a thunk from 50 years ago or 5,000 years ago, it's not ours. So we get together and we think about what we're thinking. And once it's coherent, it goes back into what he called the implicate order. So that the next person that takes out that thought, at least we've tidied it up a little bit. So it's a tiny shift in consciousness. So we borrow words from the implicate order, like symphony, and we let it resonate within us. And we feel it, and we put the word symphony back, so that the next time somebody says symphony, there's a higher resonance for it. So we check out as a symphony of voices from all over the world with an open invitation. Come and dialogue with us. The west of Ireland is beautiful, and then we'll dialogue with you. So we'll go to Oxford and Buenos Aires, and we'll go wherever we're allowed to go. And so we're looking forward to dialoguing with you.
Beautifully put. Tirtha, Jackie, Thomas, Paul, thank you so much for joining me. Everyone, love yourselves, love each other, mind your minds. That's all for us. Bye for now.
Thank you for being a part of our program today. Master Your Life is a presentation of Leaha Mattinson Enterprises, Inc. Join us next time on Master Your Life, helping you to discover the very best of you.